All right. So would you like to start with the first questions, Cam?
Yeah, I will start us off here. I'm going to start with a little bit of background question for people that are going to, introduce new people to what BioViva is working on. Can you tell us a bit on what you're working on regarding telomere lengthening therapies and maybe how does it work?
Sure. So BioViva actually is a gene therapy company that's looking to solve complex disorders and non-communicable diseases. We're best known for our desire to cure biological aging because it makes the biggest impact in the world. So non-communicable diseases are now the biggest killer on the whole planet. We actually work with several genes. I think that sometimes people think of us as like being a telomerase gene therapy company, but we work with 4 genes now, and our gene list is expanding. But let me explain to you, if you're particularly interested in telomerase, what it does. So your cells have an infinite amount of cellular divisions. It's called a Hayflick limit, and this is similar in multiple mammalian organisms. And what that means is there's a cap on lifespan. There's only so many cellular divisions that your body has to repair itself, and then it goes into senescence, and then you die of old age. So telomeres are part of curing aging, not all of it, but it's a really important part if you wanted to extend lifespan and not just health span. You would certainly want to solve the telomere problem. And it has been solved in science a myriad of times. That's been shown in reproducible data between labs, that you can take cells and you can put them into a dish and you can lengthen their telomeres, and guess what? They divide a lot more times. So therefore, that would hypothetically extend lifespan. And when we look at model organisms like bowhead whales compared to humans, compared to dogs, their lifespans are based on their telomere attrition. And so this is really important part of extending healthy lifespan. So with a gene therapy, what you're doing is you're taking a delivery method, something that can get a gene in the cell. And in the case of telomerase, you need to get the gene into the nucleus. And then that gene codes for an enzyme, which then in this case is called telomerase, and it lengthens the caps at the ends of the chromosomes. And so that's really exciting technology. So it not only lengthens the telomeres and solves a telomere problem, but it also resets some epigenetic age in the cells, and it helps with mitochondrial dysfunction. We're looking to publish a paper this year, a paper that we worked on for 3 years in a murine model that we extended lifespan by over 40%. And they were healthier, happier, and we showed mitochondrial function and a myriad of benefits to the organisms that they had over that time. So I think that people get pretty excited about that gene therapy because I took that gene therapy. I was the first person in the world to take that gene therapy in 2015, which was really cool to be part of history. And, we're spearheading moving that forward to human use. But we also work with some other genes. So we work with a gene called follistatin that helps you increase your muscle mass and helps with metabolic disorder, which are things like type 2 diabetes as you age. And we just, in our research, we had several arms, and that was one of the arms of study. And those mice actually also lived longer, over 30% longer, healthy. They were really fascinating. And then we look at a gene called Klotho that's associated with cognitive ability, the protection against the cognitive decline of dementia, the protection of your kidneys, and the protection against cardiovascular disease. So it's considered an anti-aging enzyme that probably is affecting the sirtuin pathways and helping organisms live longer and better. And smarter. That was something that got a lot of people super interested. I tried that gene therapy in 2020, and I say that's why I can juggle a company and my classes and everything right now. But I don't know. I just we'll see. I did perform higher on an IQ test, but I don't know if that was because I took it at a bad time before. So some of it is anecdotal until you get it in many people. You have to show that across the board. And then the last gene therapy that we're looking at is called PGC1 alpha, and it won't be the last. It's just one that we're researching now. And it helps with mitochondrial biogenesis. So the mitochondria are the powerhouses of your cells, and this helps you have more of them and more robust ones, therefore more energy. And all four of the genes that I talked about increase lifespan and health span. So those are that's probably more information than you wanted. Sorry.
No, that was
right.
fantastic.
We love this kind of in-depth explanation because the ideal sort of length of this interview is going to be a couple of hours, but probably a little less. But we've only got 11 questions listed, and then the rest of it's just discussing stuff. So, going into detail, that's fine. We can do that.
Yeah.
We like to sort of take a fairly loose kind of approach to the questions, so that we're not, putting people in cages, of discussion. So you mentioned that you had another gene therapy in 2020. Were there, besides the one in 2015 and the one in 2020, were there any others in between or after?
No. That was it.
Okay.
That's they're really expensive therapies, and the first gene therapy I did was a dual gene therapy. It was both the telomerase inducer and the myostatin inhibitor, and so I was a test subject for that for 5 years, and that's when we feel as on our biostatistical side that that's pretty good amount of data. Of course, we would want to follow patients for a lifetime, but we do believe that the technology is moving so quickly that even if we had thousands of people take telomerase and a myostatin inhibitor today, in the next 5 years, they would be taking the next set of gene therapies. We don't think that people should stop, and we should wait to see how long they live. And, if
there's something better coming along already.
That's not the way technology works. And so we're treating it like that kind of technology. So in 2020, I sort of was done being patient zero for that and became a patient for the next set of gene therapies.
So this presents a sort of interesting kind of face-off now between the pace of technological development and science, because science requires, of course, that rigor, that ability to say for sure that something does what you expect it to and want it to. But technology now is essentially saying we don't have time for that.
Yeah, and with biology, you actually never have time for that. So you can take the same drug, you could take aspirin, and you can give it to 2,000 people, and it will keep one person or 10 people, it's a very low number, from having a stroke. But in a couple of persons, it might create, life-threatening or death creating stomach bleeding. And so, with gene therapy, it's a little bit less, I don't know. I think that if we're careful with gene therapy, and what our company has done is looked at gene therapies that have meta-analysis between different labs, meaning reproducible data in labs that weren't connected to one another. Therefore, the data should be cleaner. With regenerative gene therapies, we don't expect to see super negative outcomes, but we might see a variety of positive outcomes where some people, just because of their genetic predisposition, might have a better outcome from a gene therapy than others, or based on the amount of damage that they have on their body. So for instance, if you were treating someone who was terminally ill, your success rate is probably highly dialed down due to the body already being in an incapacitated state. Whereas, in the future, after the safety and efficacy to a reasonable amount of these gene therapies has been produced, I believe that people will take these gene therapies rather young. They'll take them long before the damage is incurred. But of course, that's been like the precipice of the regulatory system, is that we want safe and efficacious drugs, and yet those have failed to ever be developed. So, just this last year, probably over 100,000, the data isn't out yet, but probably well over 100,000 people died taking their prescriptions as prescribed, as adverse effects of those prescriptions. So they're in what works in a lab, and like predictably reversing the aging in mice or whatever is really fantastic. But to us, to when you're going from bench to bedside, all that matters is what happens in a human. And so in that cases, it's always going to vary. We're never going to have a 100% treatment for everyone, even if 99 out of 100 or 100 out of 100 people, let's say you cured aging. Curing aging is a ways off, but we're working on that. So let's say we did that. That doesn't mean that it would work in patient 101.
Indeed. All right. Cam.
Yeah, that was fantastic. So a thought I had when you were explaining those other gene therapies is that people usually assume, like I was before, is that, telomere lengthening therapy is kind of your general treatment strategy. But then the other genes you mentioned seemed like they were more focused on affecting specific symptoms of aging and tackling those instead. Can you think of any other genes or any other symptoms of aging that you'd probably want to approach in the future with similar gene therapies?
Yeah. So when we look at treating aging, we're really looking at the hallmarks of aging. So what's happening at the cellular level? How do we reverse those processes, but at the same time, not only reverse those, but upregulate a certain amount of regeneration capability so that the body can actually repair the damage? And so it really is an interesting question. So then you start, like you said, you start pulling from genes from other spaces, like increasing your muscle mass. What does that have to do with aging? Well, it has a lot to do with aging. It doesn't target necessarily a hallmark of aging. I think we probably will find that mechanistically it does, because the gene therapy shores up all of these problems with metabolic disorder, which are an aging problem. So one of the problems with getting old is sarcopenia. You lose muscle mass over time, so I don't remember what our doctor said, like 1% of your muscle mass from the age of 30. And I did have somebody say, well, then wouldn't it be 100% gone before or it was like 5% or something like that. It was it was within a reasonable amount within a certain amount of years, but that's not the way it works. It means like 1% or 5% of that year's muscle mass. So it's not the same of like having a cumulative effect of you never have no muscle mass, right? So anyway, I digress. When you're looking at something like that, you're trying to increase the muscle mass. So you're trying to fight sarcopenia and frailty with aging. But you end up affecting metabolic disorder. You end up with better blood glucose levels, HbA1cs, and triglyceride levels. And that's actually a really interesting effect that then is targeting more of aging than you once thought. But then let's get to probably the nitty gritty. You may be serving a purpose that otherwise might have not been original to the organism. So let's say you're somebody who wants increased muscle mass. So there's the preventative effects of disease. There's being proactive against, future effects of disease. And then there's also the enhancement effects of life, of living and making agency and autonomy choices for oneself. And so, there may be other reasons that you want to increase muscle mass. Maybe you're a very slight, not very muscular person genetically, and you want to increase your capacity for weight-bearing load. Oh. So, and then Clotho, is hands down an anti-aging gene therapy. It has a myriad of benefits. We don't know how it affects exactly the hallmarks of aging at this point, but it definitely, again, has downstream. Again, a lot of the stuff, when I started in this area, I was totally in over my head, but a lot of people talked about metabolic disorder and aging, and if metabolic disorder was driving aging. It's just so happens that with a lot of the gene therapies that we've looked at, they affect metabolic dysfunction. They improve it over time, and it does increase lifespan. But I'm not trying to get stuck on a theory of aging, because that really doesn't matter. I find it really actually uninteresting. think that we need to use the technology that we have to see how we can best cure aging, regardless of what your theory is, where it stems from.
Indeed.
I think it's cellular degeneration over time. I think aging is a disease. It's cellular degeneration over time. It's as simple as that. I think the hallmarks of aging touch on that cellular degeneration over time. I think the hallmarks of aging will be built upon. I think there will be more hallmarks in the future, and those just create more targets for us to go after.
Yeah. I think it would be wise to look at science as something that's going to continue in these fields, regardless of whether we're here or not, and to attempt to intercept where it's going to be rather than where it is now. To develop our technologies to match with what it's going to be.
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, I think that's my point with like the theories of the past and the where we're going in the future. It's like, we're just here to do our part, and hopefully our doors open to a multitude of different parts that we can solve. But the biggest thing that you don't want to do is fall in love with your own theory, because when you do, then you have a hard time giving it up. And so that's why I think that those things should be not front to topic, but just what you are trying to do to solve a problem.
Indeed. Did we already ask you about anti-senolytic drugs?
I can do that.
Okay.
That was very well said, by the way. I think I was actually talking with Atha yesterday about using that very strategy with our organization, the Freedom of Forum Foundation. So that was perfect tie-in to, awesome. Anyway, let's see. So there's been other methods that have been discussed in the scientific community, such as anti-senolytic drugs. Off the top of my head, I can think of Desanative, I believe. Hopefully I pronounced that right. That's it. Yep. I guess my question is, why did you choose to go to approach aging from a genetics route as opposed to the more, traditional, quote unquote, pharmaceutical route?
Oh, that's a good question. So, I mean, gene therapy is just such a beautiful science. Okay. So if you want, you touched on senolytics, and I think that the small molecule approach is the perfect place for senolytics. I think it's a better place than gene therapy actually is for that. So clearing senescent cells, and why? Because I think that you want to have a controlled measure of doing it. Why I wouldn't take one right now is because the technology has to be very succinct and precise. So the problem, what I don't like about what I call the small molecule approach, which is vastly what I'm talking about, I'm housing all of the pharmaceuticals into there. I'm talking about pills that you take, okay? What I don't like about it is that when you're looking for a drug that will benefit an organism, you're looking at side effects, okay? And a side effect can be anything from something negative to something positive. So a side effect might be that you take a pill and it lowers your LDL cholesterol. A side effect of that same drug that I'm talking about is your increased risk of type 2 diabetes. 1 in 4 people will get it. And another side effect of that very drug is 1 in 10 persons will get dementia because of that drug. So not only that, but then we have to talk about, your whole body system. When you take a drug, it can damage your liver, it can hurt your kidneys. It can do a lot of other things that are detrimental to the organism. And what I like about gene therapy is that even though after gene therapy for some short period of time, people might have slightly raised liver enzymes, not to a dangerous amount, but slightly raised, meaning that the liver is a little bit irritated with the vector. It really is just delivering the gene that you need to make your cells into the drug factories of the protein that exactly does what we want it to do. And you don't have to take it 5 times a day. And that's just really beautiful. That's really what I would call clean technology. But in the areas of senolytics, I do like the idea of a senolytic that you could take a pill and it would get rid of some percentage of your senescent cells, and you could control that because pills tend to be cheaper than gene therapies. Let's put that out there. That's just a fact, because gene therapies are specialized and they take months to build one gene therapy for one person. So but I like the idea of being able to control it like that. Now you could do a senescent cell killer based on an mRNA or an RNA therapy. So an RNA therapy could stick with your body for about a month, or an mRNA might stick with your body for 2 to 3 days, much like the immunizations that a bunch of us took for COVID. And that's really temporary and that's really fantastic, but they do tend to be cost prohibitive in comparison to the other effects. But, I'm a proponent of gene therapy because what I really want us to do is I want us to be able to expand to the stars. I want us to be able to expand and transform into our future, what we desire for ourselves, what we find meaning in. And I don't want us to be reliant on a pill to make that happen. I don't want us. I was trying to find a bottle and all I found was my nail polish. I'm still a girly girl a little bit. I like the idea of the one and done, or at least one and done for a few years. I like the idea of the freedom that gives us back to not have to live by rituals of things that we might not want to add into our day, which is a pile full of pills. And I don't like the potential dangers that they create to a myriad of organs and systems in our body and side effects that are unintended.
Indeed. And I completely agree there. So I'd like to sort of lead on from that and ask you, what else can you and BioViva do for freedom of form as a concept, besides what you just said?
Well, when you think about your genetic future, like what do you want for yourself? I think that when you're talking about human health and you're talking about genetic therapies, you're talking about the entryway and the gateway to the freedom, autonomy, and agency of one's body that is absolutely necessary for everything else. It's really a civil rights issue, right?
Yes.
It becomes an issue of being able to make choices for yourself, whether those are great choices or bad choices, to somebody else's thinking, and whether they become what you might consider bad choices later. But it's still your right to do the things that make your life worth living or bring you grief later on. Come on, we've all made decisions that are good and bad. I have the right to actually go down the road and get in an airplane and jump out of an airplane with one simple signature, but I don't have the right to go genetically modify my body in this country in any way that I see fit. And so I think that we're on the precipice of a whole new conversation. It started with women's right and agency to their own body. We're still obviously struggling with that, but it's not just that type of an issue. It's an issue for everyone now. Do you have the right to modify your body in the way that you see fit? And, shockingly, you don't. So we need to actually move towards the right to do that. And when you pick up basic conversation and basic movements in health, that's where you have to start, because where does a patient's right start, and when do you become the patient?
Indeed. And I think at some point, given that we all age, we all follow our genetic programs, at some point everybody becomes a patient. Everyone.
I know that's the weird thing. Like, even when they show these commercials, they'll show this commercial and they'll be like, okay, let's just not name a company. This company is making lives better. And they show people who are like your grandparents and whatever. And you're like, oh, okay, they're making life better for my grandparents. When the truth is they don't ever say it's actually you. We're getting in front of you because you're eventually going to need us, and we want to look like a trusted brand. Who's watching that program? It's probably not even your grandparents who are watching it. But anyway, you want to get out there. You want to make noise. You want to get agency to do with your own body as you wish. And a great way to start that movement is through healthcare. Aging is the biggest medical unmet need. And anyone, no matter how you picture your future, whether you picture it being very visibly different than you are now or not, you're going to want to live long enough to see that, And actually, these different modifications that certain people may choose for, they actually may have life-saving benefits to them, so we should leave no rock unturned. In, I think, 2016, I spoke at a conference and I was talking about a gene therapy that was going through clinical trials in which they were using the light-sensing algae genes, so genes from light-sensing algae in human eyes. And this year, they have the first patients coming forward who can actually see some amount of visible light who were completely blind. So the idea of using technology from other species has already been done. It's already being done in clinical trials and it's working. And the genetic diversity, we certainly don't want to limit ourselves to what I call human genetic technology, because genes are technology. We are going to need to span out and look abroad. Indeed. So it all really plays into one arena. Even if you talk about it like conservatively, I'm talking about it conservatively right now. If you want to open up the conversation, we talk about it at a deeper level, but just at the conservative level, you need the rights to your genetic future.
Thank you very much. So at this point, do you feel that gene editing as a sort of mass available thing is in the near future or the far future? And how far is near or far to you?
Well, okay, so there's gene editing and then there's just the traditional delivery of genes. And so our company is looking at the traditional delivery of genes. So there are hundreds of trials going on right now and thousands of people who have taken part of gene therapies, not for aging. There's a few people who have taken part in those, but for the most part, through the regulatory bodies, thousands of people are participating in gene therapy. As far as editing. So when we're talking about editing, we're vastly talking about CRISPR. Talents have been used. There's a couple other technology, but we're generally these days vastly talking about CRISPR technology, and it already is being used in humans. So it is appeared to have cured a couple of patients already with sickle cell anemia. And this is all ex vivo gene work. So when you have a technology like gene therapy delivery, you can, if you have genes that are safe for an organism, you can put them right into the organism, into the target tissues. If you're doing something like in sickle cell anemia, where you want to restock the bone marrow with hematopoietic stem cells, the precursors to blood cells, then you do ex vivo gene therapy work to make sure that all the cells are in line before you put them back in the body. And that's what's been done there. And that is really exciting. So both of the types of gene therapy have now been done in humans, and we can expect that will just traject. The US FDA has approved a multitude of gene therapies now, just a few, but it's a lot, and it's a great proof of principle for a one-time therapeutic that it has a curative effect for disease. So, I think that we'll continue to see this trajectory of these being used more and more. These are all monogenic diseases that are coming through the regulatory system. So they're diseases where a person has a single gene mutation generally, and then the gene therapy replaces or doesn't even have to replace the old copy, just puts a healthy copy of a functioning gene in the cell. And now complex diseases are starting to get looked at. We're working with a study offshore about Alzheimer's, and we're really excited to get that paper out the next month or so. But the UC San Diego just started a gene therapy in the United States, the first FDA-approved gene therapy clinical trials for Alzheimer's. And Parkinson's is also being looked at, and other complex disorders of aging. So this is a really exciting time. So what that means is gene therapies are on their way. Some of them are already here, but they're just for a really small set of the population. And then we're just trying to prove out our technology to treat aging and get our technology in clinical trials as well, therefore making the access faster. Now, people can go through medical tourism in some cases to get access to these technologies.
Yeah. That's the point.
Yeah.
There's a question on our list here that you're literally walking straight into, which is, what do you think about the gene therapy regulatory environment in different jurisdictions? This is something that one of our volunteers asked to include in the interview.
Yeah, so I'm writing my thesis right now for my MBA, and it's all about this. I'm trying to develop, I'll need a lot of help as this goes forward, but I'm trying to develop a new regulatory route for terminally ill patients so that they can get access to these type of medicines that Right to Try Act does not give them access to. I think that we have a lot of people in this country and all the countries of the world who would like to make their last stand doing something great for the world, and they may even get to live by doing it. And the risk aversion is literally, I think at this point, could potentially be leading to 41 million deaths this year. And that's the number that will die of the biological aging this year globally. And if it is risk aversion that is standing in our way, I've got a new regulatory path in order to be considered for a solution for that. Otherwise, I would just have to suggest that everybody go through any means they could, if they're ill, to get access to these type of technologies, because it's a valuable proposition to be able to give back to the world, to participate in something that could change the life of billions of people. And people actually want to do that. That's what I'm showing in this paper. They want to have meaning in their life, and they want to have purpose, and they want to have an altruistic sense that they can make their last stand to participate in something that may change the future. And we need to do that right here in the United States, right in the UK, right in every country of the world should have a route to do this.
And with that actually reminded me that in the last couple of years, we had a paper published that we actually contributed to the funding of the study by Ben Ramanauskas at the University of Oxford, and he looked into the regulatory environment for body modification in the UK. So he might be somebody you want to speak to.
That'd be fantastic.
Yeah, we'll see if we can arrange that, if he's available for that. All right, Cam, have you got another question?
You mentioned the Right to Try Act. Could you explain that for me real quick? Because I think I might have a question spinning around it.
Yeah, so the Right to Try Act gave terminally ill patients the right to use experimental medicine, medicine that maybe had only been through phase 1 of clinical trials in order to treat their condition. And the problem with it, of course, is that a drug would have had to been through phase 1. And the reason that the drugs that we're working with haven't been through phase 1 isn't because they can't pass safety. It's because companies can't raise the $10 to $15 million for the animal studies that are not even good predictors of how a drug will work in a human body to get them to phase 1. That's why we need a new route to do that. And so essentially, if you're sick and you're dying, you could say, I want to ask a drug company if I can use a drug that they historically used for some other purpose that has at least been through phase 1. And it's very cumbersome. It's hard. You have to do a lot of work, or else, probably, that's not the first thing on your mind is let's go do a bunch of research. about what might be available, what failed after phase 1 clinical trials that I want to get access to, because it's probably not the best stuff. So that's why I'm pushing for something called best choice medicine. And it literally is defined as drugs that in basic research perform better than anything that's available on the market.
That's a good move, I think.
Oh, I mean, it's such a good move for people. I don't know if it's a good move for me because I really don't need anything extra to do in my life. But it's a good move for people because, I mean, we have gene therapies that are extending lifespan, health span, solving mitochondrial dysfunction, wasting, metabolic disorder, and yet nobody has access to them because we can't afford the millions of dollars of animal studies that just will show again and again that they work. This is all reproducible data. It's been done in multiple labs. So it's absurd.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of wasted potential.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah. Like, everybody who dies is like burning a book. I mean, you're losing everything, right? You lose all of the asset of that person, everything that they ever learned. And you probably lost half of it before they died because of cognitive decline and the inability to assess their own internal data.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense. And I also feel like another difficulty is that whenever the public hears something like, gene therapy, right, they usually have this negative reaction towards it based off of like what a lot of the earlier work was, a lot of the earlier perceptions were on gene therapies. So we already have this negative stigma built up that's a little bit hard to work against. And so kind of this push to change that, how this works, and allow openness to right to determine one's medical outcome and one's medical treatment strategy also, ties in play with kind of revitalizing that stigma that's currently present against.
Yeah, and I think that probably we should clear up what that stigma was and what the statistical significance of it was. At the time, it was very statistically significant because it really was the main gene therapy delivery method. So everyone is clear who's listening to this. In 1999, a boy, Jesse Gilsinger, died of gene therapy. One person died. He wasn't actually, after looking at safety studies, a good candidate for the gene therapy. He died not because of the gene, he died because of the delivery method. Much like COVID-19 is killing people today, he had an adverse reaction. His immune system had an adverse reaction to the gene therapy. That completely halted the industry for over a decade. And because of that, now millions and millions of people die. And in the meantime, over 1 million people have died taking their prescriptions as prescribed, prescriptions that don't cure a disease, that may or may not lengthen the lifespan of the participant who's taking that prescription. So when we put things into an honest position and help people understand what the pitfalls were before. And yes, everything went back to the drawing board and better gene therapies were made. And now thousands of people are taking gene therapies. And so far, no one has died. They've died of other reasons around being sick, but they haven't died in lieu of the gene therapies. Also, in around that time, there were a few kids that got cancer because of another integrating delivery method that they had at the time. And that's not used in vivo anymore. But in the meantime, before Jesse died, a couple of cures were done in children with severe combined immune deficiency. And the area has taken off again with several regulated drugs. So with the media, we're always looking at the shark attack, right? It's like, oh my God, the killer gene therapy went in and killed somebody. But all of the stuff that is not brought to the media about, and you have to go to the CDC or the World Health Organization and those sort of areas, especially the CDC, to look up these numbers. people in the meantime were dying in droves of the drugs that they were taking. And not only that, every one of the people who is not with us anymore, who didn't die of an accident or some, sort of offshoot of other ways to die, died of aging. And that's a lot of people. So when one thing goes wrong, we do have to take a moment for pause, but we don't have the luxury of time anymore. You don't have the luxury of time. You look rather young, but I guarantee you from what I know, you do not have the luxury of time. We need to now move very quickly. We need a new regulatory route. We need humans to come forward and get these therapeutics to known outcomes. And in order to actually see this in any one of our lifetime, even people who are born today.
I suppose, just thinking of that, it would be a very sort of useful thing to be able to live longer if we want to ever reach other star systems. Otherwise, we will, of course, need generation ships that take multiple generations to get there. If we can make a generation longer, then that's one way of avoiding, the problem of not having anybody who remembers Earth. But just sort of getting out there, because you mentioned space earlier, it just sort of played on my mind a bit. Anyway, going back to the questions, there was one here about how do you view aging from a personal perspective or from a scientific perspective?
So from
how do you compare that?
So a personal perspective, what is life then in that case? On a personal perspective, it's your experiences, it's your interface with these 4 dimensions that we know. It's time spent with loved ones, and it's the ups and downs of life. Those are massively important, right? From a scientific, aging is cellular degeneration over time. From a personal, aging is experience until your brain doesn't function well enough to actually, collate those experiences into useful outcomes. So, even though they're different, how they might be defined, cellular degeneration might be defined as the hallmarks of aging, and then, the mechanistic downstream catastrophe that happens from there, like inflammation and dysfunction and degradation of organs. But, if we could get it under control, life would be less limited. More prospects open up. We don't have the mortality priming that is prevalent in everyone from a certain age on. From around your 40s on, you have a risk of dying of biological aging. You start to think in limited terms. We don't want people to think in limited terms. Limited terms destroys the planet. It uses up resources. It stockpiles for nuclear families. Those are not our best attributes. And as you were saying, going to the stars gives us the ability to expand our consciousness into space. It gives us the ability to go and find other life in which might have genes that we need to make further steps. And when people think about living an unlimited life, they often think about living just as they are. But what if your senses were very different? What if you're, one of the things I'm really fascinated with and looking for a company to help me with is pentachromacy. What if we had the ability to see in billions of colors instead of millions of colors? That sounds like a simple task in comparison, but if we could see like a cuttlefish, everyday experience would be different. We would see things that we can't see. We're actually colorblind, so.
I would say that falls squarely in freedom of form, the ability, to be what you want to be. If you can improve your eyesight or any sensors for that matter, using genetic editing or other associated methods, then that is very much in our remit under the Freedom of Form Foundation and under a few other organizations that are related to it.
Well, and I guarantee that something like that would actually become a standardized care in 20 some years, because there may be a lot of information that we're missing. That we might be able to look outside and know when there's a hole in the ozone layer, or know how to dress, or we might find a bunch of other information in nature that we just literally have not been able to communicate on the right level just by being able to read its colors that it puts off. We know that so birds, for instance, like blackbirds to other birds can look like multicolorful. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but they use this lens and they'll show how a plain blackbird can actually look more like a parrot to another bird than to us. And they use these colors to communicate, and we're vastly just missing out.
Absolutely. I think that the ability to augment ourselves in that manner will certainly be very beneficial as well when we go to other planets and extreme environments, even on Earth. To be able to adapt ourselves. I think that humanity, sort of, and its descendants, if we want to sort of look at other species that we might become, can define ourselves through our adaptability. And I see this gene editing and associated sort of adaptations that we can make as being absolutely prime candidates for demonstrating that adaptability.
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, you've got there's so many cool things to unpack there. So let's say we're traveling in space and we come across what appears to be a fabulous planet and we want to go check it out. Well, it's not like Star Trek. You don't just get to beam down there and go and breathe the air. There's a whole bunch of things that could kill you. So what you'd want to do is you want to send out your little net. You want it to come back. You want to look at the general pathogens, and you want to be able to make RNA vaccinations within a matter of minutes, hopefully, maybe months, and then you take them and then you go down to that planet. But then there's other things that you're talking about. So just on our planet, we're about to face some extraordinary issues with climate change. Exactly. And I think that we always because we're amazingly long-sighted and amazingly short-sighted at the same time, people don't understand how genetic engineering could save the species, because there's a lot of ego around a human mind, but 99.9% of all species have gone extinct.
Exactly.
And we don't have any reason to believe we won't. And global warming actually eventually means a global freeze. And so it sounds really crazy to people now, but fur might be like an freaking awesome life-saving measure for the future, and so
or just for living on a cold planet somewhere.
So I mean, because there's a bunch of specialties to it. So I have an Anatolian Shepherd, and he's got a double coat, and those dogs in Turkey, they live from -6 degrees to 110 degrees. I mean, without putting on a jacket. I mean, that's extraordinary technology.
In Fahrenheit. You're talking in Fahrenheit there, aren't you?
I couldn't hear you. You clipped out.
Sorry, I said you're talking in Fahrenheit there, aren't you? Not Celsius.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. In Fahrenheit. Yes. Sorry. I'm an American. I will. I have to disclose that I might be half as smart as the rest of you, and I don't work with a proper metric system. That's for, yeah. So.
Don't worry. I'm American too. So.
Yeah. So everybody has to go. And go find out on Google what that actually means. But anyway, very, very hot and very, very cold, and that's what would be considered good gene technology if that came down to survival, right? Being able to get nutrients from solar light would be an extremely useful tool for people to have traveling in space, or surviving in places that are very difficult to survive in. I think that, we can look at what's around us and make some guesstimates, but we can't assess for the future, what beauty will actually be, the standard of what that actually means, and what normal will be. Because even though we're similar, we're very different from people just, 300 years ago. And I imagine that we'll be vastly different in the future, and people will probably spin off into their own identities as we go forward. Gene therapy, there's a misconception that it's like eugenics. Eugenics was breeding the healthiest people with the healthiest people to have only really healthy offspring, right? It's
at least that was the sort of utopic kind of attempt to explain it, although I believe there were darker undertones often used with it as well.
But gene therapy is actually the diversification of the species. So with gene therapy, you're adding genes, you're not, subtracting, and you're not choosing for particular traits except for like healthy outcomes. And then as people want to, then they can probably choose for traits. But I think that, unlike Gattaca, I don't think that probably the mainstream would try to go for the Barbie and Ken sort of thing for at least for a while till they got bored of it. But I think that a lot of people would actually shoot off and do new and interesting things. And as long as it doesn't affect the germline of the species, then that's fine. But when we do know the genes that are associated with ultimate health, I think then, we do have to have a bigger conversation. That's down the road. That's not my company. It's not my specialty. But we do have to have a bigger conversation about ensuring that children are not born with a predisposition to be sick.
Indeed. And that's going to be a tricky one, obviously due to the current ethical questions surrounding designer babies. Now, do you think that transhumanism as a movement at the moment really gets everything that we've just been saying?
Well, I think that like transhumanism, then, if you're not talking about the political party, which I really liked all the stances that they stood for, I think then it's going to vary. I think that generally transhumanists want to use technology for the betterment of the planet and humankind, and I can agree with that. I think some get a little bit on the side of forget the planet and just like have good human outcome, but you can't actually do both. So I don't agree with that. But I think that the idea of transhumanism is to use technology for a better outcome. And I absolutely agree with that.
Awesome.
Yeah, and that's definitely just a quick comment. It's definitely, we were talking about how people mistake genetics, what we're working on today, with eugenics a lot, and I feel like there's even a greater overlap with the transhumanist movement. I feel like people make that misconception a lot more, when in reality it's another one of those things where we just have to work on clearing up misconceptions and misguided beliefs about what something really is aiming to do. The goal of, right. Okay. Yeah, that was all.
No, explain, because there's probably, the thing is, I sit sort of on the outer loop of these things. So the more that you can explain and talk about it, now that the listener wants to hear about that, you really have to tell what you know, because it's really not my area of expertise. All I know is I really enjoyed the Transhumanist Party because I liked all the initiatives that they stood for, which was, good and freedom for all people, regardless of the skin color, your sexual orientation, or what you want for your future, and, using science for the betterment of humans. Boy, that sounds like a good idea. I love that.
It is. And that's exactly what they stand for. But when people hear that people want to use technology to make people better than what they currently are, live longer, be stronger, right? People immediately make this association like, okay, so if you're trying to improve people's lives, then someone is going to come out superior, right? And that's their association they immediately make. Mm-hmm. And that leads them down this route to thinking about eugenics. and thinking about
yeah.
topics related to eugenics.
I think the only people that we have to worry about that are worried about somebody being better than them are the people that are having those thoughts. I'm really concerned that that's the first thing that comes to people's mind when people are already born better than you every day. There are people who are superior athletes, they're superior at academics, they're superior at memory. I mean, what we're trying to do is level the playing field and make it so that everybody has a fair access to those technologies. I mean, if your immediate response is somebody's going to have something more than you, that's just basic human algorithm technology. I mean, that's out. Give it up.
Exactly. That's immediately what you have to follow up with. That point you just made is if someone immediately says that to you, which I've had some people, which explain these ideas to them and they follow up with that, and that's the point I give them. The goal isn't to make one person better than everyone else. The goal of the movement is to make sure that everyone can be what they want to be.
Yeah,
and that doesn't matter
if it doesn't affect a lot of people. I mean, I get what you're saying. It's like, my company my company was built for the world. So if we don't have the world to treat, we're kind of out of business. Like, why would I be wasting my time with that? And like what you're saying is like the incremental betterment of people probably does start with a few people, but then it expands to everyone, or else you wouldn't be talking about it.
Exactly.
Yeah, there wouldn't be much point in doing it if it was only going to be for a few people and then saying, oh, that's it, we're just going to keep it to our little clique.
Yeah, why would we even talk about
not like that? Yeah.
There would be nothing to talk about. I'd just go off and, go with my friends and we'd do it. And, but there's a lot more to that. There's a building of the technology and there's the democratization of the technology. And probably, even though there probably are some weird people who think that, you probably don't want to end up being the last person alive. It might be actually quite mind-boggling. And though people irritate us sometimes, they actually create a sense of interplay and discussion and different thinking. I mean, I think that we appreciate the diversity, right? So I have no reason to believe that one person wants to take off with the technology. They would end up a very lonely person.
Yeah.
That's very fair point, really. So, do you think that the concept of freedom of form, of morphological freedom, is something that is going to be easy for people to understand through this context? Do you think it's something that we can successfully show to people?
I think it's critical. If you don't believe in the right to freedom of form, I mean, isn't it just a critical step to everything? So we're talking about baby steps in health, right? But that builds to building a bridge to bigger ideas. So one of the reasons that you would talk about health is because it's something that we should all be able to agree on. We should all be able to agree that curing Alzheimer's disease, for instance, is the most moral thing to do. But we should also be able to agree on that your right to change your body in a way that you see fit, as long as it doesn't, create a cascading effect to the people around you. It will mentally, but that is negative to their health or then, challenging people is a really important thing to do, right? That's really important. It's really important to challenge people to think bigger and to think better. But if we don't have morphological freedom, which I would argue we really don't have right now, it really should be a human right. It has to be. It has to be written in as a core concept, even to achieving the most simplest things in health at this point.
And I suppose a right carried forward to those who are based on humans, but may not necessarily count in every sense anymore as humans. Well,
yeah, I remember when I first was learning about aging. And I said, well, one way to cure your aging would be to modify yourself so you didn't identify as human. And then therefore you've cured human aging for yourself, because you would never die in a traditional human aging sort of scenario. I mean, that's one way to look at it, right?
Sure. I'll become a fox. All right. I didn't die of human aging. I died of vulpine aging. Yeah, completely different.
Distemper or whatever that is common. Well, I think that the future is much more interesting even for you than you think. I don't think that you will become something distinctly that you identify with as a thing. You're going to become something in between there, right? And that's what's so cool about it. Humans create, and when we fail to create, we fail society. And so by your attempt and desire to create something new, even out of yourself, I mean, I think that is fascinating. I think that that's extraordinary. And, your entire journey needs to be followed. And hopefully, if you decide to go down that route in the future, you let my company follow all of your data. And we'll put out a picture about it.
Well, we hope to be a rising tide that lifts all boats here at the Freedom of Form Foundation. So we don't want to cut off our data from being useful to an organization like yours. So by all means, let's keep in touch about that. Okay, so what advice would you give to fellow biotech startup entrepreneurs just getting started? How can they build the next amazing startup in this field that history will look on kindly?
Oh, I think so. If you want to have a big impact and I think, number one, you need to find your passion. What are you really passionate about, and what are you willing to do for the rest of your life? If it was even longer than it is now, what is something that you would be proud of being part of, and what do you altruistically want to do? Because it's not just, I don't think that the future is for people in business who are there for the money. I think that we're beyond that. If we were just there for the money, we might as well just start a soap company and put really cool logo on it and sell a bunch of soap, because everybody has to use soap, right?
Exactly.
But when you have like a future goal that's bigger than that, I don't think that you mind doing with less. And you have to realize that you might do with less for the entire rest of your life, and that you might be a pioneer in your area and only make an incremental change that someday someone will see, but that you must get up every day and do that. And if you have that sort of passion, if you want to be a step in progress, then you need to put everything into it, and you need to learn to work with very little money. You need to not do it it's not glamorous. So if people think that I'm going to, get into biotechnology because it looks really glamorous because people do occasionally a podcast or something, I would not do it for that. It's a lot of hard work, and a lot of really tough decisions need to be made. But if you've got something amazing, I think you should do it. We're going to put out a study about Alzheimer's, for instance, and it looks amazing. But even though it looks amazing, it's not a cure for aging. It's only like a very, very incremental step in where we want to go. And yet we have to do all of this work, months, years worth of work around this in order just to show some incremental step. And that is fine for us. We're just like, all of these little baby steps that we can make towards something, and is okay. So, I think you just really got to be able to know that you can stick with your decision, or that you can pivot your decision as you go. But I think we're out of, even though we have the richest people in the world now that we've never had before, we're out of the doing something for the money.
Yeah.
You
In
need,
fact,
yeah.
even if you look at Elon Musk, and a lot of people will, summarily decry him because he's got, on paper, a heck of a lot of wealth and counts as quite often the most rich person in the world. He's sort of vying for that place with Jeff Bezos. But I see in him, at least, an effort to be doing something useful for the world. And I think that he's part of this new sort of tranche of people and thinkers like you as well, who are not really in it for the money. The money is just a byproduct, really.
The money makes
of
it so
doing
you
something.
can do more. Yeah, the money makes it so you can do more, and you actually feel like when you get some money, you work even harder. And I agree that Elon Musk, even though I know a lot of people, some people are on one side or the other side of him. I like him. He works really hard. And you don't see him not working. You don't see him not participating. You don't see him, I mean, he's current with what's happening, and it's even more work at that stage. So yeah, money is going to be a side effect. So if you do something great that adds purpose in the world, you're going to make a lot of money, but you don't do it initially to make a lot of money. And he didn't do SpaceX to make a lot of money. I mean, that's actually hemorrhaging a lot of money, right? And then at the end of the day, you might make a lot of money because you created a transport system, you created a way for people to get to space, you created, new technology that helps people get farther. People in all walks of life, from scientists to the average person, get farther in achieving their goals. And so I'm saying that there would be a lot of money if you meet a need, but you shouldn't choose what you do for that reason. But you should choose it for meeting a need. And if you meet a need, yeah, I mean, the whole thing will work out, but you're going to work really hard. And is it worth it? I would say it is.
Indeed. I mean, I'm not going to claim to be making much money here at all. I'm working for a charity, and at the moment the charity is the thing that is paying me the most, and that isn't a lot, but it's just enough to sort of survive on, to live on, and to do the next thing. And as long as that's the case, then I'm above that minimum threshold to be a part of this and to carry it forward, and that's what matters to me.
And you're going to be a hero of the future. And hopefully you will be there. And I'm here to make sure that you're there to actually experience what that's like, because you're getting out and you're talking about things that are not popular, that are not known to most people, that are the product of having the ability to have the time to consider a completely different way of life, a different lifestyle, a different way of living. That's it's bigger than, I mean, I haven't gone there. That's new to me, but I know that we have the convergence of meeting a goal of the freedom to do with one's body. But, you will be a person because you have persevered through this early time of the unknown, very few people knowing about ideas of the future. And that's really important, right? That has a lot of purpose. But everyone on this call and a bunch of people listening know that that's not glamorous, that, people are not knocking at your door and going, oh, this is so fantastic that you're doing this. I mean, you're, in your pajamas working your ass off 24/7.
Well, I usually try to put some more suitable clothing on before I start working hard. But
I don't. I love
said usually. Yeah, the pandemic has been both a blessing and a curse, hasn't it, for us?
Oh, I think it's really fantastic. For a while, I actually moved into my office. My feeling was that the closer I was to the computer, I could work as late as possible. And then when I was tired, I didn't have to go upstairs. I could literally just sleep right here. And then when I got up in the morning, I mean, I was right to work, right? We all sleep with our phones. So I already was working before I get up, but then I can jump right to the computer and do things. And I don't have all of these extra steps between me and getting work done. And I absolutely loved it.
It's fascinating, actually, that you mentioned this, because there was a video a while ago by CGP Grey on YouTube about Spaceship U, and it was about how you have to set out your home, set out your spaces that you work in, that you live in, that you eat in, so that they don't overlap too much, so that you have some kind of separation of your work-life balance. And I think that's incredibly important for the mental health of anyone who's doing a job that isn't necessarily what they would love to be doing. It's just a living. But when you're an entrepreneur who is actually chasing their dream, then you want to be as close to that work as possible all of the time, like you were saying, which is why you can see my bed in the background here. I am in my bedroom with my Freedom of Form Foundation computer.
That's
right. It is right here ready for me. So if I need to dive straight into it, I can. Though usually I do try to grab a cup of tea first. I'm British, what do you expect?
I say that all of the time, and they say, wait a minute, you work so much. And it's like, thank you. You just helped me define that. There's making a living, and then there's doing what you love. I mean, this is my life. My colleagues are, my family and my friends, and the rest of them are, here in the house. And most of my friends that I've had for years were mostly hooked up on social media, and COVID has even pressed that even farther. So, we're just, I actually have benefited from COVID significantly, getting to rest, getting to catch up on my sleep, getting to catch up on all the paperwork for the company and get everything in order. It has.
I would say I'm still trying to do that, but I'm certainly making more progress on it than I would have otherwise. And the pandemic is obviously a terrible thing in terms of the death and destruction that it's caused, and the disruption that it's caused to the health industry. But at the same time, we can learn so much from that, and we can do so much more as a result of it.
Well, it was a good example of why we need to cure aging. A lot of people with aging complications died of COVID. And so, when I talk about the benefits, I'm talking about, the personal benefits to a lockdown. I'm not talking about, the thing as a whole, although hopefully it will also ignite the area of treating biological aging as a point in case of, what was just handed to us, which was ever more evidence of the need to treat aging.
Same concept applies to genetic technologies. This is the first successful wide-scale run that we had to, rush out of mRNA technology being used as vaccines. I feel like that goes a long way towards clearing up that perception of genetic technologies as something that's here to help us.
Oh, it's so amazing. And I mean, now because of that, Moderna is working on an HIV cure, HIV vaccine, and something else. And I think it's the common flu vaccine. And, I mean, that is, we should have been working at this pace always. We'd have a whole bunch of these problems solved. We wouldn't be here having this conversation. I guess the beauty is we're now here having this conversation, but I would prefer that millions of people were still alive and living healthy and happy lives. So it was well timed for not only new technology and new thinking about how we're living and how we're running ourselves into the ground, but also about what are we doing that we actually love to do. And I just so appreciate that. There's nothing dysfunctional about working a lot, if you want to call it that, if you're doing something that you love and you're passionate about. I mean, of course you would be working towards your goal.
So it was the best of times and the worst of times, and quite possibly a renaissance, we could say.
You could definitely say that. You did.
All right. Cam, would you like to close us out with the last question on the list?
Oh, you're giving me the honors?
Yes.
Are you very sure? All right.
Yes.
All right.
I hope
All right. This is a good question. This is a little customary question me and Atha have had going for some interviews. If you could be any animal, which would you be?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I think it would just be something brand new, because I particularly like being human, because it gives me the ability to have an unlimited sort of future. But what attributes would I want? I would probably want the skin color changing abilities of a cuttlefish. I would want the speed, maybe the sustained speed of a horse, just because it's not really about short runs. It's about like really doing it. I don't know. I haven't thought about this very much. I love my dogs and cats. I mean, cats are just so perfectly beautiful that I love Bastet. So I would say I was actually going to bring my cat ears in, but I couldn't find them. But I have the disposition of a wolf. So I definitely am a lone wolf. And the wolf is probably my predator spirit animal, hands down. I actually have pictures of wolves around my room. And I love the loyalty of the dog, you know. But I mean, like, I just, you know, I don't know, the jump, you know, the springing ability of a gazelle. I mean, why would I limit myself? I just would want so much of the awesome technology. You guys, fox and
Canine, dog. I like dogs. Speaking of it, grab her.
Oh, and the cat just came in. The very allergen. Hi, come here, lady. Come on.
Come here and give Liz a rash.
Yeah. Oh, it's okay. I'll just take a Benadryl. I mean, the thing is, she needs to be pet every day. She wants to be pet every day. She's a little bit wild. She generally wants to be pet at my feet rather than in my lap. But she's so sweet. Hi, Nikki. I would be absolutely surrounded by animals. If I had loads of cash, I would have a farm. I've always wanted a petting zoo. I'm vegetarian, vegan.
Yeah.
So I would love to have like a rescue sanctuary, not just for like the most awesome looking animals, but like for animals that need home. I love my time spent with them. I love communicating with them as close to their own languages as I can. I had a horse growing up, and we had such a bond. My grandma, who grew up on a farm, said she'd never seen anything like that before. I mean, I really love being surrounded by different species. Hi. Woof, woof.
This is Gabby. Say hello. Gabby,
What's
speak.
his name?
This is Gabby. Speak, Gabby.
Hi, Gabby.
Gabby,
Hi,
speak.
Gabby.
There you go. She said hello.
Oh.
She's a little worm. She does not like being held for very long. Hi.
Corgis are the cutest puppies. I mean, they're just hilarious. Hi, Gabby. Yeah, that's a disposition. Our dog I told you, he's an Anatolian Shepherd, and he's more wolf-like. He's a little bit more standoffish and observational. We historically had Great Danes, and they're all different. They all have sort of their own different communication style, but I love his demeanor, because he's just kind of like, yeah, I love you, but I could survive without you. That's him at the door. One moment.
Perfect timing.
Oh my gosh.
Nice to meet you.
What a good boy.
Hi, sir. Oh, hi. You want to say hi? Oh, come here. Oh, he's like, yeah, whatever. Come here. Come here. He's really big, and I can't just pick him up because he's kind of wolfish, like, Hi.
Oh, hello there. Hello.
Hi, buddy.
Adorable. I love
He's a
him.
beautiful dog.
Very
Very,
beautiful.
very interesting dog.
Awesome. So you're a wolf, cuttlefish, cat, and gazelle all in one.
I will take the best of all traits if I can. I'd like to scale a bear mountain, and I would love to be able to swim to the bottom of the ocean if I wanted to too. But then that would be like a really different form for a human than
Maybe it would be good if you could be a shapeshifter.
yeah. That would be perfect. I know my daughter wants wings. She wants to fly. I'm gonna pay for her to do a tandem what's it called, paragliding, because she really wants to fly. I think that's cool.
Well, speaking of flight, we do actually have a paper on the Freedom of Form Foundation's website in which we explore some of the basics of what would be needed to do, tails and animal ears and wings. And we actually look at how big would the wings need to be to have sustained powered flight for an average sized person. If they were to, become, say, a dragon style form, but still quite anthropomorphic.
Would they be pretty big in that case? I mean, maybe people could genetically modify themselves to have lighter bones.
I think we worked out that the wingspan would need to be in the order of, multiple meters. But it is possible, because obviously you can fold them up. It is possible to actually get that into the sort of frame of a person and to be carried around. It's just going to be a bit on the outer limit of what's reasonable to try to grow, and it's probably going to be something that's easier to kind of grow in a lab setting and then graft on, or to use a cybernetic kind of approach. But the thing is, though, if it is a biological set of wings that you've literally grown as part of your body, the energy that it would use probably means you would only get a matter of minutes of flight before you are tired out and need to take a rest. So it wouldn't be something that you could use particularly long distance, unless you find an excellent set of thermals that just goes on and on. So it's probably going to be a bit of a limited thing as far as we can tell, but possible.
Well, I mean, and also like these new flying like hovercraft things, they use like drone technology. Those are freaking awesome. So, the thing is, you would have to make a lot of modifications to make that happen. And maybe like your wings are really awesome if you're at the top of a mountain, and like the people who are like paragliding or whatever, you would use them to sort of float more than anything else. But there's a bunch of technology, like you said, that's coming to meet the desire to, I want to fly. So I just put this jetpack on and I go fly around, or this hover thing. It might not feel as biologically satisfying, but it might simplify lives for a while. And and other various aspects of just being able to do things mechanically. And then there's VR and AR, right, where people are starting to immerse themselves in worlds, which I am literally just getting my hand chewed on, by the way. Puppy, he's still a puppy. He that help us actually experience these things more in real time, more right now, and prepare people for the future. So there's a lot of like sort of in between steps But of course, you always have to strive for a goal, because that's what creates the reality of more extreme technology. And I would be amazed and delighted to meet somebody who wanted to have meters worth of wings attached biologically to their body, and deal with the how society really isn't built for that. That would be extraordinary to me. And I've always followed online people who do extraordinary things with their bodies, like the tattoos or the piercings or the whatever. And it's extreme technology, and it's extreme interface with the world. And I love that, and it's very it actually will help design the future for everybody else, even if they think they don't want to participate. Let's just see, once you get there to technology that people can adopt, how many people actually, it becomes a stylized fashion. It becomes an integral part of health or safety or something else. I think it's fantastic. I'm going to turn away from him now. He's going to keep fighting.
See if he gets the message.
Yeah. We'll probably just go to the other side. Yeah.
Well, I'm in an interesting position myself, because it was actually during the early days of this pandemic that I found out that it's not just that I would like to be a sort of anthropomorphic red fox, but actually there's a sort of spiritual connection going on, at least on some level of my psyche, if not, whether you believe in the soul or not. What I would now like to try to do is to be this kitsune form, which is multiple tails. So that's going to be even more of a challenge, more of a stress test for the technology, you could say. And I sort of, I'm viewing it that way, because I think that's going to be more beneficial, than to sort of get all awkward about it. And there's groups of people who take the spiritual side very seriously when it comes to what animals or forms they were or had in the past, in their past lives, reincarnation, etc. There's groups like the Otherkin and the Therians, and I've mingled with them quite a bit online, because they are part of our core sort of interest group. The often people who turn up in our charities Discord server and want to talk to us. And I've ended up realizing that I'm sort of one of them myself over time, and it's quite fascinating what you can learn about yourself when initially all you're doing is mingling with people in the name of trying to see if they're interested in working with you on something. Then you find actually what I'm doing is directly connected to what they want to express, and what's more, I seem to want to express it for the same reason. And oh gosh, I'm one of these people. Actually Otherkin. It's fascinating the way that the journey of life can take you.
It is interesting. I think that I don't know anything about that area, so I will not pretend to. But I do know that, like, just the different archetypes of people and the different, even when it comes to the different religions, how similar many of them are, even though they came from different parts of the world, really speak to who we are and what our desires are for the future. And clearly, there's an unconscious consciousness to do many things. And so our group may have one, and your group may have one. And I just think that that's a really beautiful diversity. I do wonder, I do have to ask this.
Go on.
So in the future, if people converge off into specificities of different identities, do you think there will be a cats versus dogs war? You know what I mean? Like, people were like, oh no, we went the right way. No, we went the right way. And I don't know. What do you think?
Cam.
Well, I think we're already, I guess you can, there might be, there's something with the future to tell, but I do know that we kind of have discussions like that. I guess not really more so around form, but I guess the strategies to get there. You know, the Freedom of Form Foundation is pretty darn open to different strategies to try and get to that goal that we are looking at. But there are definitely people that try and want to take more specific routes, how they have a specific idea in mind and are like, hey, let's dig into this. And that's perfectly fine. I think that's not really more of a war, more so than it is just kind of a, you know, general scientific deliberation that happens, right? And which is a good thing. Anyway.
Yeah, I think there's a friendly kind of rivalry that's really only meant in jest online, you know, between those who have a different sort of species identity to each other, or indeed those who have a different spiritual identity as to how they gained that species identity. But at the end of the day, it's, I think, considered weird amongst us all if you can't get along with those with other species identities or spiritual identities, because we need to work together really to make these things happen. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Cam?
Nope. That summarized it perfectly.
I'm putting him
All right.
outside so he can go outside. I just had to get his little thing. Okay. Yeah. So I guess that's what I was wondering about, is if, you know, like, because, you know, do you think that we'll be able to overcome differences? So historically, we use differences as a reason to steal resources or take resources or whatever, or not like certain groups. I'm wondering how, when things diverge, if they'll become so mixed that there won't be like an identity group, or if people will actually start grouping off into specific identities. And then, because if you get that, then I guess the worry would be that people would then use that as a difference and an othering.
I think the idea of freedom of form itself, it will be carried with the technology that makes it possible. It has to be for the avoidance of such wars, and for the sanity and the safety of everyone. We need to view freedom of form as not just an inalienable right, but as a philosophy by which to live, and that is to say that just like we should be able to have any gender identity, and any sexuality in a modern society, so too should we be able to have any species identity and to express that in what we do with our bodies. And I think that if we can already live together now online in the groups that we have, we're off to a good start. I mean, there's already basically every person in our chat room, nearly every single one of them has a different species or something different about them to each other. And if you look at the future and say, are we going to survive at all, as a species long term, as a civilization? The only way we're going to really do that is by working together and by overcoming our differences. So if we do dwell on our differences, that I believe would be a very sort of negative outcome.
Yeah, it would mean that we can really evolve.
Yeah, we need to sort of view freedom of form as an opportunity to say, you know what, people might have been racist, for example, about skin color in the past, but now we've got so many more differences that are so much more obvious between us, and we're perfectly fine getting along with each other over those, that racism is going to look very stupid to everybody. Even a little kid will be able to say, why the heck would you say that? Why the heck would you think that somebody with a brown skin is different to somebody with a white skin. When you've got so much more on the list of more obvious differences that you could have picked from, and nobody bats an eyelid at those. So that is my hope, that we can sort of render that kind of warring over silly little physical differences in a person, in people's bodies, or choices of what they do with themselves. We can render that irrelevant. We can consign it to the history books and not have it return.
I have to ask this question because it's all new to me. Would you want, when you say that you like a fox, would you want your consciousness or your brain put into an actual fox, or do you want to be some human fox hybrid?
Well, if I was to have my consciousness put into the body of a fox, that would certainly be a very interesting experience. But it would be, I think, unfortunate because it would shorten my lifespan significantly unless we genetically modified this fox to, obviously, first of all, cope with having this human brain or human consciousness loaded into it, but also to live as long as a human would. And is a fox's body really ideal for that? Quadrupedal? From my perspective, possibly not. From the perspective of some of my friends and colleagues, it may be more acceptable for them than what they have in a human body. So, you ask any group of furries and other Keynantherians and other people who want morphological freedom, what it means to them, you're going to get a different answer from each of them, and often more than one answer from each of them. So it depends. But I am personally quite interested in being what we refer to as an anthropomorphic or anthro form, which is a mixture of a human baseline body with animal attributes added and integrated into that body, preferably in a very seamless manner, so that there's nothing jarring about it, nothing that falls into the uncanny valley. Take, for example, what you see in cartoons, and I'm talking about like Disney's Robin Hood, even to some degree Bugs Bunny, although Bugs Bunny sort of does the proportions a bit weird. But the way that those animators draw those characters, they walk and talk like people, but they have obvious animal attributes to their bodies that are quite consistent and do not sort of have these weird juxtapositions of visible human features and visible animal features mixed, unless you look at some Japanese animes where you have like Nico characters that use, like, for example, fox or cat tail and ears on what is otherwise essentially a human body. And for some reason, they don't tend to fall into the uncanny valley. I'm not sure exactly where you would position that uncanny valley. I think it depends on the individual, but it seems to be somewhere in between the Nico form and the anthro form.
And then, so what features would you want? What do you picture? Like you're talking about, like the ears, or?
So I would go for a good sort of 50-50 kind of position. Myself, I would have, vulpine ears, the muzzle, the fur. I would change my shape of my pupils and my eyes a bit just to make them that bit more suited. But I'd keep the blue color. I like blue eyes. And I would go with 7 tails because that is apparently spiritually how many I'm supposed to have. I don't actually follow this notion that the number of tails has anything to do with wisdom, by the way. To me, that's hogwash. I think it's just down to a happenstance of genetics in a previous life. But it's, just a personal belief thing that, obviously everyone's got their own interpretations of what's right or wrong in a religious or spiritual perspective. So I'm not here to dictate about that. I'm just saying that's how I feel about it for me.
And the seven tails, they probably wouldn't be in the same place. Would they be like down your spine, or like where?
Oh no,
where would you?
they would all be arranged around the same spot where you would expect a tail to be. So we're talking hexagon with one in the middle, basically.
And then you're going to have your clothes and everything modified. Maybe you're not thinking about clothes. Maybe you're thinking that you would have fur.
Well, I would have fur, and I would expect that would render clothes a bit less necessary. But at the same time, obviously, I don't want to be disrespectful to humanity and its norms and its expectations too much. So, if I'm in a sort of human interaction setting, I will still wear clothes. If I am in a setting where, like, say in some distant future, thanks to your technologies, I'm able to live a ridiculously long time and go and explore some other planet or whatever, and like with my friends who've also transformed themselves into furry characters of some description, we all, start some kind of new colony or whatever, then we would probably establish our own rules about how much is enough clothing, probably while we're on the spaceship on the way there. And that would be fine. That would be up to us because we'd be starting our own thing, and it would only affect us, and it wouldn't, be anything to do with what humans are seeing or whatever. But at the same time, if we are transforming ourselves here on Earth in the next, say, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe 50 years, depends on who you ask, we would be the ones who are setting the standards of what is acceptable and what isn't, and of what kind of tone we want to set with our new forms and how we present ourselves to people. So,
have you looked at, like, is there a full genome sequence of your perfect animal outside of what would be considered the mutations for something different? Have you compared that next to a human genome and looked at what differences there are?
I've not actually taken too much time about doing that yet, and I have a good reason. Because at the moment, I think that it would take a very long time to do a satisfactory comparison between a fox genome and a human genome, even if I ignored the fact that I want to combine them in interesting ways and add extra tails, and possibly other abilities in the future. So if I was to do that now with today's technology, it would take a long time. Instead, what I'm focusing on doing is working with my colleagues in the Freedom of Form Foundation and in other organizations I'm a part of to develop systems that make it easier to actually process those kinds of data and to make models of the body. And actually, in the Freedom of Form Foundation at the moment, we have a project on called Project 3D Anatomy. It's helping us to make that model of the body that we can then tweak and adjust according to what the genes would do. And it's in the very early stages at the moment, but it will eventually be part of a wider kind of set of tools and system.
Like, fantastic ways to get grants towards your aim is to look to write grants for sort of those genetic and differences, similarities, mapping one species to another. I think that actually that could really lead to fantastic information. That just came to mind. Now, psychologically, how do you feel your life will be different in your future form? Like, how do you feel like the world will interface with you? And when you're answering that, I got to get him back in because he got stuck. How do you feel that? What goal does this meet in your basic needs? This change for you?
Cam, would you like to answer that with yours? Or were you not prepared for that?
I was not prepared for it, and neither am I. Like, this is stuff I'm still processing for myself.
I understand. I think that, like, so when you picture your future and you picture this fantastic future of your new attributes, and like, I'm wondering, like, does it just feel like you then have become whole, and it doesn't matter how other things, like how the rest of the world interfaces with you, because those are challenges you'll just deal with later? Or do you feel like the world would finally see you as you are, and that its reaction to you is important?
I think that there's a little bit of each. I think that from my perspective, if the world doesn't like me being a kitsune, an anthrofox form, well, it can lump it. But that's because I'm doing what I want to do with my body. It's not anyone else's business.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, it would be nice if the world likes it. Obviously, it would be a lot easier to get along with people that way. And I hope that through the kind of educational efforts that we're making in the Freedom of Form Foundation, that we can help people to appreciate species identity and the expression of it as rights that should be not only enshrined and protected but celebrated, just like you have with Pride events for lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and queer people.
Well, you actually have your own group. And so by seeking out people who have an interesting, insightful, incredible designed future that the rest of us sit outside of, you've actually found a group of people. You've become alone and then you've come together. So you kind of have, that's an important important on your hierarchy of needs already is being met. You've found like people with like ideas. And so that's actually really interesting. So even if some of the world didn't, even if most of the world didn't interface well initially with you, you would have a group, a family that does. And so you would have that covered, is I think.
Precisely. And I think that we'll always be here for each other. And long may that continue to be the case. And here's hoping that through your technology, everybody, human and non-human identities alike, will be able to benefit with the ability to reduce aging or reduce the impacts of it on their bodies over time, so that they can live longer. And,
well, absolutely. And it just goes so much farther than that. You give people the ability to dream even farther than what limits other people, and to bring the conversation into a loop of a different conversation, which is, I love it. I'm so amazed. Humans never seem to fail to amaze me. I've never spoken to anyone who didn't have an interesting story to tell. And this is just, this is so creative and it's so future forward. I just can't wait to see it.
Awesome. Well, thank you ever so much for your time this evening, Liz. It has been an absolute pleasure speaking to you.
It's been reciprocate that message. This was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to I guess, tales.
Why not? I'll tell you what, Liz.
People have been like, if people want to be so boring that they just don't, they're like, oh, no, I think I'm fine. That's boring. That's really boring, actually, in comparison. Isn't that boring?
Yeah, I know, right? I'll tell you what, Liz, when I've transformed, feel free to visit, or I'll visit you. We'll have a hug, you can enjoy the tail floof and we'll see what we can do for you with your body.
I'm a couple. Yeah. Oh, somebody's having fun over here with his toys. I need a little bit of that spirit too, because that's really cool. But anyway, I'm absolutely fascinated. I learn something every day, and today I learned even more. I've spoken to you before. It's always a pleasure. I love how you push me out of a comfort zone into an area of really thinking of new and even more imaginative areas to take technology to solve problems. And I think I mean, I just can't say how much it's really fantastic. Anyone who's not willing to have a conversation like this, you are absolutely missing out, because don't be so damn limited. Get out of your box.
Exactly.
There are
It's
things
like, you know,
that you haven't thought of, and they're not bad
Yeah.
things. They're just things you haven't thought of. It's awesome.
I know there's people who might say that you saying you want to live a lot longer, if not forever, you know, would be really out there and really, you know, completely alien to their day-to-day way of thinking. And it's a big difference, such a change that they are scared of it. And you can say to them, honestly, this is tame compared to what's out there.
Yeah, how would you like 7 tails? You know, what if you had the option? Which one are you going to choose for? Of course, people are going to choose to live longer, healthier. Do you want to go out? Somebody is offering you a ticket out of here. Yeah, he's not going. He's
having fun.
I am his grandmother. He's my son's dog, and I'm the one that he really likes to roughhouse with. And so when I'm doing something that's recording in here, everyone's supposed to keep him from like banging at that door. But I mean, he just loves me, and I just love him. You should see us on the floor. We look like 2 dogs going crazy. We just, I'll bite him on the neck, and he'll, you know, bite. You saw he bites me, and we just have so much fun. So we just play like puppies.
Fantastic.
That's definitely your wolf side showing right there.
Oh, I've heard that's a genetic thing. I growl when I get mad. I will growl, and my mom did too. So
interesting.
Yeah, we're primitive minded.
Perhaps if you look far enough back in time, you know, you'll get to some medieval stories of werewolves, and you'll be like, is that where this came from? Just take a look at a full moon, see what happens, you know.
Yep. Who knows?
But,
we're an
not ridiculous
evolutionary branch in off of a primitive form for sure.
Well, yeah. I think the you know, the fun thing here is we can actually make some of those myths and legends happen if we wanted to.
Yeah,
it's technically possible.
That would,
you know,
that would be extraordinary.
Yeah, it'd take a long time to get to the point where you could have a really fast transformation just happen from the right wavelength of light hitting you from the moon. But technically, it's possible if you are crazy enough to want it.
Yeah, that would be a very fast transition for any species, even the grasshopper, who becomes a plant-eating maniac and devastates crops. I mean, even that takes some amount of days. So I would hold out on that, but not say it's impossible. But I will say that I very much enjoyed the conversation, and I will continue to work to helping you live healthier longer, and you will continue to dream up a completely different future for us as we live healthier longer.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you very much, Liz.
Thanks for having me.
Pleasure to have you.
Thank you.
Take care.